President Cyril Ramaphosa has named former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas as his special envoy to the U.S. This follows the expulsion of former Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool. Rasool left the U.S. after weeks of antagonistic statements and moves by the Trump administration towards South Africa. Jonas's appointment as a special envoy gives him more direct and flexible engagement with key stakeholders within the Trump administration. That's as he won't be held back by traditional diplomatic protocols that an ambassador would have to observe. Commenting on his appointment, Jonas stated that there is no quick fix to the complexity arising from the tension between the U.S. and SA, but he believes there are areas of commonality and mutual interest that can be embraced to reaffirm the long-standing ties between the two countries. U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that the country will continue boycotting Group of 20 meetings in South Africa. A post on the head of state's Truth social media account says that the U.S. cannot be expected to go to SA when land confiscation and genocide is the focus. Trump claims that white farmers and their families are being killed and their land is being taken from them. South Africa has denied this. SA is the first country on the continent to hold the G20 presidency, and top U.S. officials have avoided events related to the Group of 20 so far this year. The Road Accident Fund CEO Collins Letswalo has committed to giving the Special Investigating Unit access to his bank account statements. He says this is to prove he is not corrupt. This comes amid a probe into multi-million rand contracts and tenders into the entity. Letswalo added that the SIU investigation was recommended by the RAF board and that the unit must investigate without fear. Schroder European Real Estate Investment Trust says robust industrial portfolio valuations continue to offset declines in other sectors. The group's direct investment property portfolio has been independently valued at 194 million euros. This reflects a marginal like-for-like decrease of 0.3%. That's as office portfolio valuations slipped 2.7% and industrial portfolio valuations ticked up by 1.8%. In international news, China's exports rose sharply in March after factories rushed out shipments before the latest U.S. tariffs took effect. But an escalating Sino-U.S. trade war has darkened the outlook for factories and growth in the world's second biggest economy. Let's take a look for more detail.
Chinese trade felt the effects of Donald Trump's tariffs even before the levies kicked in. Figures out Monday showed exports surged over 12% on the year in March. That was around 3 times the increase forecast by analysts. The numbers suggest factories were rushing out shipments before the tariffs took effect. However, the figures could now plunge, with China facing levies of up to 145% on most shipments to the US. One economist told Reuters it could be years before the export numbers return to the level seen in March. Monday's figures also pointed to weak domestic demand in China, with imports falling 4.3%, or more than double the decline that was forecast. That means policymakers could struggle to make up for any downturn sparked by a drop in exports. Economists at Goldman Sachs and Citi have already cut their growth forecasts for China as a result of the trade turmoil. One market expert said a plunge in soybean imports, much of which come from the US, suggested state firms in China were already shunning American produce. Overall, Beijing's trade surplus with the US rose to almost $77 billion during the first quarter. That's likely to keep the country in Trump's sights, given that closing the gap is at the top of his agenda. With China vowing to fight US tariffs to the end, Monday's figures don't bode well for any easing in tensions.
And Sony said it will hike the price of its PlayStation 5 console in markets in Europe, Britain, Australia and New Zealand due to high inflation and fluctuating exchange rates. Here's more detail in this report.
Sony's PlayStation 5 just got more expensive in some parts of the world. The Japanese tech giant said it will hike the console's price in markets in Europe, Britain, Australia and New Zealand. It cited high inflation and fluctuating exchange rates. Sony said it will raise the cost of the PS5 without a disc drive by 11% to €499.99, or just under $570 from Monday. The price of the same device will rise by a tenth in Britain to nearly $567. Manufacturers of electronics face a number of headwinds. They include trade disruption in the wake of tariffs imposed by US President Donald Trump. Sony's Japanese rival Nintendo said earlier this month it will delay the start of pre-orders for the Switch 2 gaming device in the US. That as it examines the potential impact of tariffs. The Switch 2 is the long-awaited successor to its hybrid home portable Switch and is due to launch in June.